I watched my husband hand a velvet box to another woman on Valentine's Day. My heart shattered into a million pieces. But instead of crying or confronting him, I did something that turned their twisted love story into the biggest regret of their lives. Here's exactly what happened. Before we dive into this story, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications because you won't believe how this ends. And drop a comment telling me what you would have done in my situation. Now, let me tell you about the Valentine's Day that changed everything. My name doesn't matter, but my story does. I'm 38 years old and I've been working as an accountant for 15 years. I'm good at my job, real good. Numbers don't lie, they don't cheat, and they always add up in the end. I wish I could say the same thing about people. 12 years ago, I married a man I thought was my soulmate. We had 2 beautiful babies together, a 10-year-old son and a 7-year-old daughter. Our life looked perfect from the outside. Nice house in a good neighborhood, 2 cars in the driveway, family vacations every summer. I thought we had it all figured out, but about 3 months before that Valentine's Day, something shifted. You know that feeling when something just isn't right, but you can't put your finger on it? That's where I was. Gerald started coming home later and later from work. Always had an excuse ready. Big project demanding. Client. Traffic was terrible. He changed the password on his phone, said it was for work security. Started going to the gym at weird hours. Bought new cologne. The expensive kind, not the drugstore brand he'd worn for years. I noticed everything, but I pushed those ugly thoughts away because I didn't want to believe what my gut was screaming at me. Valentine's Day morning came and I woke up hoping things would feel normal. Again, maybe a romantic gesture would remind us of who we used to be. Gerald was already awake, sitting on the edge of the bed, and he looked nervous. His hands were shaking a little when he handed me a card and a box of chocolates. The card was generic, the kind you grab at the drugstore checkout line. The chocolates were the same brand we'd been buying for years. Nothing special, nothing personal. He kissed my forehead and said he had an important client meeting that evening. On Valentine's Day, my heart sank, but I smiled and told him I understood. After he left for work, even our kids noticed something was off. My son asked me why. Daddy seemed so distracted lately, and I didn't have a good answer. I spent that whole day trying to focus on anything else, but this nagging feeling wouldn't leave me alone. It was like a voice in my head kept saying, check, just check. So that evening, about an hour before Gerald said he'd be leaving for his meeting, I went out to his car. I told myself I was being paranoid, that I'd feel silly when I found nothing. But I looked anyway. Under the passenger seat, tucked way back where you wouldn't see it unless you were really looking, I found a small velvet box. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was the most beautiful diamond necklace I'd ever seen. Delicate, expensive, clearly chosen with care, and hanging from it was a pendant with an engraving that made my stomach drop. To my forever, gee, that necklace wasn't for me. Gerald hadn't bought me jewelry in 3 years. I stood there in our driveway holding evidence of my husband's betrayal, and something inside me broke, but it also ardent. I could have confronted him right then. I could have thrown that box at him and demanded answers, but I didn't. Instead, I put the box back exactly where I found it, went inside, and called my best friend. Nah, I asked her to come watch the kids for the evening because I had something important to do. When Gerald came home to get ready for his meeting, I acted completely normal. I smiled, kissed him goodbye, and told him to have a good time with his client. The moment his car pulled out of the driveway, I grabbed my keys and followed him. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Part of me still hoped I was wrong, that maybe he really was meeting a client and that necklace was for me, just hidden poorly. But deep down, I knew better. I followed him across town to an upscale restaurant, the kind where reservations are hard to get and meals cost more than our electric bill. I parked across the street and watched through the large front windows. That's when I saw her walk in. Vanessa, I knew her face immediately. She worked at Gerald's company, and I'd seen her at holiday parties and summer cookouts. She was always too friendly with my husband, too quick to laugh at his jokes, too comfortable touching his arm when they talked. I'd mentioned it once to Gerald, and he'd laughed it off, said I was being silly, that she was just a friendly person. Looking at them now, through that restaurant window, there was nothing friendly about it. They looked like lovers. They looked comfortable. They looked like us back when we were happy. I watched Gerald pull out that velvet box and slide it across the table. Vanessa's face lit up like Christmas morning. She opened it, gasped, held that necklace up to the light. Gerald stood up, walked around the table and fastened it around her neck. Then he kissed her. Not a friendly, heck, not an accident. A real deep, passionate kiss that told me everything I needed to know. I sat in my car and cried for maybe 10 minutes. 12 years of marriage, 2 children, countless memories. All of it felt like a lie in that moment. Every late night, every dismissive comment, every time he'd been too tired to talk to me. It all made sense now. But then something shifted in me. The tears stopped and clarity took over. I'm an accountant, remember? I deal with numbers, with evidence, with building cases, and that's exactly what I was going to do. I drove home before Gerald got back. When he walked through the door 2 hours later, I was on the couch watching TV like nothing had happened. He told me about his successful meeting, how the client was really impressed, how this could be big for his career. I smiled and said that was wonderful. Asked if he wanted some leftover dinner. He seemed relieved that I wasn't asking questions. He thought he was getting away with it. That night, after Gerald fell asleep, I started my investigation. I found his laptop. He left it on the kitchen counter, and the password was our daughter's birthday. Because he wasn't as careful as he thought, I discovered a secret credit card I didn't know about. Statement after statement of romantic dinners, hotel stays, jewelry purchases. That diamond necklace wasn't the first gift he'd bought her. There were charges going back 8 months. 8 months of lying to my face. 8 months of kissing me good night and then texting her. 8 months of building a whole separate life. I took photos of everything, screenshots of text messages he'd forgotten to delete, records of every suspicious charge. I built a timeline organized by date, complete with evidence. By 3 in the morning, I had a complete picture of his affair, and then I started planning my next move. I called Na the next morning and told her everything. Na works as a paralegal, so she knows a thing or two about evidence and legal strategy. We spent hours going over my options. I could confront him privately, demand couples therapy, try to save the marriage, or I could be smart about this. The thing is, I didn't want to save a marriage with a man who could look me in the eyes and lie so easily. I wanted out, but more than that, I wanted him to face consequences. So Na and I came up with a plan. I was going to act like everything was fine. I was going to be the perfect wife for just a little while longer, and in the meantime, I was going to protect myself and my children. I opened a separate bank account that Gerald didn't know about and started transferring money legally, my half of our savings. I made copies of every important document, mortgage papers, birth certificates, insurance policies, tax returns. I consulted with a divorce attorney who told me that with my evidence I'd have a strong case for primary custody and a favorable settlement, but I wasn't ready to file yet. I wanted something more, so I did something bold. I planned a dinner party for the following weekend and invited several couples from Gerald's office, including Vanessa and her husband, Dennis. Yes, Vanessa was married too. Two families being destroyed for their selfish desires. When I told Gerald about the party, he looked like he'd seen a ghost. He stammered, asked if that was really necessary, said we hadn't hosted in a while, and maybe it wasn't a good time, but he couldn't say no without raising suspicion, so he agreed. I watched him squirm all week, watched him probably texting Vanessa in a panic, and I felt nothing but cold determination. The night of the party arrived. I'd spent all day cooking, cleaning, making everything perfect. Guests started arriving around 7. Vanessa and Dennis came fashionably late, and the tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. Gerald couldn't even look at her without sweating. I played the gracious hostess, making sure everyone had drinks, that conversations flowed, that the food was just right. We ate dinner. People laughed and chatted about work and kids and vacation plans. Everything seemed normal, and then I stood up and tapped my wine glass to get everyone's attention. I told our guests that I wanted to make a special announcement, that I'd put together a little presentation about love and marriage. Gerald's face went pale. I pulled out my laptop and connected it to our TV. The screen lit up with a title, Slide, The Truth About Betrayal. And then I started clicking through restaurant receipts with dates, hotel bookings that coincided with nights Gerald said he was working late. Screenshots of text messages where he told Vanessa she was beautiful, where he said he couldn't wait to leave me, where he promised her they'd be together soon. And then the finale, a photo I'd secretly taken at a recent work event, showing Vanessa wearing that diamond necklace with the engraved pendant. The room went completely silent. You could hear people's breathing. Vanessa's face drained of all color. Dennis, her husband, stood up so fast his chair fell backward. Gerald tried to speak, tried to explain, but only strangled sounds came out. I looked around at our guests, at people we'd known for years, and I said calmly, I wanted you all to see what kind of people they really are. This affair has been going on for 8 months. While I was home raising our children, my husband was buying jewelry for another woman. While Dennis was working to support his family, his wife was sneaking around with my husband. Then I reached into my pocket and pulled out a manila envelope. I walked over to Gerald and handed it to him. You've been served. These are your copies of the divorce papers. I want you to pack a bag and leave my house tonight. In my name, by the way, in case you forgot. I turned to Vanessa, who was now crying, mascara running down her face. He's all yours now, I said. Good luck with a man who cheats on his wife and lies to his children. I'm sure he'll be faithful to you. Dennis didn't say a word. He just grabbed his coat and walked out, and Vanessa ran after him, still sobbing. Gerald tried to apologize, started saying he could explain that it wasn't what it looked like, all the usual lines. I held up my hand and stopped him. Save it for your lawyer. You have 30 minutes to pack your things and get out of my house. Other guests quietly excused themselves, clearly uncomfortable, but also unable to hide their shock at what they'd witnessed. Within an hour, my house was empty except for me, Nina, and my sleeping children upstairs, who'd been at her place during the party. The next few weeks were chaos. Gerald moved in with his brother. The gossip at his Office spread like wildfire. Vanessa's husband filed for divorce immediately. She got transferred to a different department because no one wanted to work with her after what happened. Gerald tried to fight the divorce, tried to claim I'd humiliated him publicly, but my lawyer shut that down fast. Evidence was overwhelming. The fact that he'd used marital funds to support his affair, that he'd lied repeatedly, that he'd put our family at risk, it all worked in my favor. The divorce was finalized 4 months later. I got primary custody of the kids with Gerald having visitation every other weekend. The house stayed in my name. He paid child support and alimony. His lawyer tried to reduce the amounts, but again, the evidence made it impossible for him to argue. I found out later through mutual friends that Gerald and Vanessa tried to make their relationship work after both divorces were finalized, but it fell apart in less than 3 months. Turns out that relationships built on lies and betrayal don't have a strong foundation. Who knew? My children went through a rough adjustment period. I got them into therapy immediately, and we spent a lot of time talking about feelings and changes. I never badmouthed their father to them, even though I wanted to. They deserved to form their own opinions as they got older. But they weren't stupid. They saw who showed up for school events, who made dinner every night, who helped with homework and tucked them in. They saw who was present and who was making excuses. As for me, I threw myself into healing. I started going to therapy too, working through the betrayal and the anger and the grief of losing what I thought was my life. I spent more time with friends I'd neglected during my marriage. I took up painting, something I'd loved in college, but had stopped doing. I got promoted at work because I was damn good at my job, and my boss recognized it. Slowly, piece by piece, I rebuilt my life into something even better than before. Year after that Valentine's Day, I ran into Gerald at our son's soccer game. He looked rough, tired, older somehow. He asked if we could talk, said he'd made the biggest mistake of his life, wondered if there was any chance I'd consider giving him another chance. I looked at him, this man I'd once loved more than anything, and I felt nothing but pity. I told him no. I told him I'd moved on, that I was seeing someone new who treated me with respect and honesty. I told him that he'd done me a favor, actually by showing me I deserved better. The truth is, I am seeing someone new, a kind man who makes me laugh, who calls when he says he will, who includes my children and our plans, who doesn't have a secret life. And even if that relationship doesn't work out, I know I'll be fine because I learned something important through all of this. I'm stronger than I ever knew. I learned to trust my instincts. I learned that strategic thinking beats emotional reactions every time. I learned that sometimes the best revenge isn't screaming or breaking things. It's taking control of your own story. People ask me sometimes if I regret how I handled it, if the public reveal was too harsh. And honestly, I don't regret it. Single thing. Gerald didn't just cheat on me privately. He built an entire double life. He risked our children's stability, our financial security, my health. He deserved to face public consequences for his actions. So did Vanessa. They thought they could have their affair in the shadows while maintaining their respectable images. I just turned on the lights, and that's how I turned the worst Valentine's Day of my life into the beginning of my freedom. If you enjoyed this story and think I handled it right, smash that like button. If you think I went too far, let me know in the comments. I can take it. Don't forget to subscribe because I've got more real-life stories coming your way. Remember, ladies and gentlemen, never let anyone dim your light. You deserve respect, honesty, and real love. Until next time, stay strong and know your worth. Peace.